Do you know what would happen if Sanji actually married Nami? Yeah, the entire One Piece world would lose its absolute mind. Because Sanji marrying Nami isn't just some random event. This is the world's biggest simp finally locking down the woman he's been obsessing over since the very beginning. So let's talk about how every single person in One Piece would react to this absolutely insane news. Let's start with Zoro, because he would be absolutely disgusted. Like, genuinely disgusted. Zoro already thinks Sanji is ridiculous for being such a massive simp, but actually marrying Nami? Zoro would just stare into the distance for a solid minute and then say something like, "I knew this idiot would do something this stupid eventually." And yeah, he'd probably go train immediately after hearing the news just to cope with the sheer embarrassment of having this man as a crewmate. But here's the thing, even though Zoro would be roasting Sanji non-stop, deep down he respects him, not that he'd ever admit it. So while he's loudly making fun of him in front of everyone, he'd quietly accept it and move on. But Zoro is absolutely going to hold this over Sanji's head forever. Every single argument from this point forward, Zoro is bringing up the marriage. Every time. No exceptions. But someone who would react very differently is Luffy. And honestly, Luffy's reaction would be one of the funniest things anyone has ever witnessed. Because Luffy genuinely would not understand what marriage even means in this context. He'd hear the news and probably just ask if there's going to be a big feast. But then, about 10 seconds later, it would actually hit him. And he'd start panicking because his cook and his navigator are now married. And his tiny brain would start processing what that means for the crew. And then he'd just shrug it off. Because as long as Sanji keeps cooking and Nami keeps navigating, Luffy is completely fine with whatever is going on. This man is genuinely unbothered. Although, knowing Luffy, he'd try to eat the wedding cake before anyone else gets a slice. Now, Usopp would absolutely lose it. And not in a bad way. Usopp would be the most excited person on the entire ship. He'd be screaming that he always knew it, that he called this from day one, even though he absolutely did not call this from day one. He'd start telling everyone he secretly set them up, which is completely false but very on brand. And then he'd start crying happy tears, because Usopp genuinely loves his crew more than anything. But then, about 30 seconds later, he'd start panicking because if Sanji and Nami are married, does that mean the ship's atmosphere is going to be weird forever? And Chopper would be absolutely over the moon. Chopper loves love. So the second he hears the news, he'd start jumping up and down, making that face where he's pretending he's not excited, even though he's extremely excited. Then he'd immediately run to Sanji and ask if he can be the official doctor at the wedding, to make sure everyone stays healthy during the ceremony. And honestly, Chopper would just be purely, completely happy for them both. Because these two have always been important to him, and seeing his crewmates find happiness together is exactly the kind of thing that makes Chopper's heart full. Now, Robin's reaction would be absolutely perfect. She'd hear the news, look up from whatever she's reading, smile that quiet smile, and say something elegantly devastating like, "How wonderful. I suppose the ship will be even louder from now on." And then she'd go right back to reading. But Robin would genuinely be happy for them both. Because Robin understands better than anyone what it means to find people who feel like home. So yeah, Robin is happy. She's just going to express it in the most elegantly subtle way possible, while absolutely roasting everyone around her with devastating one-liners about the whole situation. Now, Frankie and Brooke would be completely electric about this. Frankie would cry actual rivers of tears and keep yelling about how super this is. And then he'd immediately start building an automated wedding ceremony setup for the Thousand Sunny, with rotating platforms and a retractable dance floor. Because when Frankie gets emotional, he builds things. And Brooke would play the most beautiful piece of music anyone has ever heard. Because Brooke has been waiting for centuries in the loneliest silence to find people worth playing music for. And now two of his crewmates are getting married. Brooke would pour everything into that song, and then immediately make a skull joke to cut the tension, because that's Brooke. Now we need to leave the Sunny and talk about how the rest of the world reacts. Because this marriage is front page news across every ocean, starting with Akainu. Because Akainu does not have time for this. This man is out here trying to purge every pirate from the face of the earth, and now he has to deal with paperwork about a wedding. He'd crumple the report and blast it with magma. He's furious. Not because of the wedding specifically, but just because pirates are still out there doing things, and that bothers him on a fundamental level. Now here's where things get really interesting, because we have to talk about Boa Hancock. Because the moment she hears that one of Luffy's crewmates has gotten married, her brain is going to immediately connect this to Luffy. she's going to spiral. She's going to think that if Sanji can get married, maybe Luffy will also get married one day. And then she's going to panic about whether Luffy will marry her. And then she's going to turn 17 marine officers into stone, just from the emotional energy of the whole thing. Meanwhile, Luffy is on the ship eating his third bowl of meat, and has absolutely no idea any of this is happening. Now Shanks would immediately pour everyone on his ship a drink and declare a celebration, because Shanks loves a good excuse to celebrate, and he genuinely cares about Luffy's crew. He'd probably also send an insane and extremely expensive wedding gift that arrives completely out of nowhere with no explanation. Just a massive box showing up on the Sunny with a note that says congratulations from Shanks, and nobody would know how he even found out where they were. That's just Shanks. Now we have to talk about Zeph, because Zeph is the man who raised Sanji, who ate his own leg on that rock so Sanji could survive, who gave Sanji everything, his passion for cooking, his code of never hitting a woman, his dream of the all blue. And when Zeph hears that Sanji has gotten married, this tough, weathered, no-nonsense old man is going to break. He's going to go very quiet, and then he's going to turn away so nobody sees his face. And then he's going to wipe his eyes and pretend he wasn't just crying, because Zeph spent years watching Sanji grow from a stubborn, hot-headed kid into a man. And now that man has found love. And then there's Nami's side, because Nojiko would hear that her little sister is marrying a cook who is absolutely obsessed with her, and her immediate reaction would be to laugh. Not cruelly, just genuinely amused. Because Nojiko knows Nami. She knows Nami always holds the cards, always controls the situation, always has the upper hand. So the idea of Nami having a husband completely devoted to her every need is both hilarious and perfectly on brand. But at the heart of all of this is the real story, because Sanji spent his entire childhood being told he was worthless, locked in a dungeon, told his emotions were a weakness, and then he found the Straw Hats. And in that crew, his devotion and passion and absolute refusal to let anyone he loves get hurt became his greatest strength. And Nami spent years trapped, forced to steal for Arlong, carrying an impossible burden completely alone. And then Luffy put his hat on her head and told her without a single word that she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. So when these two people find each other, it's not just a couple getting married. It's a man who was told his love was weakness, discovering that his love is everything. And a woman who was told she had to fight alone, discovering she never has to fight alone again. And when the ceremony happens, wherever it happens on the ocean, when Brook plays that song and Frankie is sobbing while operating his retractable dance floor, and Luffy is already eating the wedding cake, and Zoro is standing at the back looking annoyed but absolutely not going anywhere, and Chopper is crying harder than anyone in the room, and Robin is smiling that quiet smile, and the sea is stretching out endlessly around the Thousand Sunny at sunset, even the most cynical marine is going to feel it. Because that's the thing about the Straw Hats. They don't just find adventure, they find each other. So how would you react if Sanji actually married Nami? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and watch this video next.